The Congo is the highest supplier of cobalt in the world, with 3.5 million metric tons of cobalt reserves. In fact, there's more cobalt in the Congo than the rest of the world combined, and they take about 70% of the market share. But it's come at a huge cost to the people of the DRC. But what exactly is cobalt? Well, cobalt is a mineral found in southern eastern region called Katanga. The main reason for its huge demand is because the mineral is used in lithium ion batteries to keep them stable and rechargeable. It's one of the few minerals in the world that the entire world depends on. These batteries are in laptops, in phones, and in electric cars. Without this mineral, the world itself would simply not be able to function. It affects every single one of us, and it's becoming more valuable than gold as demand rises and rises every year. But unfortunately, like any cash grab, it is heavily exploited to a disgusting level of human suffering and in some cases slavery to meet the high demand for this mineral. The Congolese government does little to stop this because it has such a huge economic resource for the country that has had 2 wars since the late 1990s, leaving the country in utter debt and turmoil. It's a war-torn, deeply impoverished nation that has been subjected to generations of pillage and ransacking going all the way back centuries now to the slave trade. So when this money pit was found, unfortunately it was always going to be exploited. Now, China was one of the first countries to get involved with this very early on, before anybody knew how big cobalt was going to be. In 2009 they signed a deal with the then president of the DRC by the name of Joseph Kabila for access to mining concessions in exchange for development assistance, which was a commitment to build roads and some public health clinics, schools, hospitals and so on. Before anyone knew what happened, the Chinese companies had seized ownership of 15 of the 19 primary industrial copper cobalt mining concessions in the Congo, and they effectively dominate the majority of what is mined from these mines. There has never been more suffering, more human rights violations and more profit made in modern times than in the mines that are happening in the Congo than any other country in the world currently. The Congo has hundreds of industrialized mines that supposedly follow strict guidelines and work conditions, and these mines in theory supply all the big tech companies such as Apple, Samsung and Tesla. So there are 2 types of mines: industrial legal mines and artisanal illegal mines. So artisanal mines are illegal mines mostly run by local militias. They tend to be at times literally feet away from the industrial mining areas. They pay people $1 a day and will cram thousands of them in these small mining areas to make huge profits as they give very little pay to their workers. There are hundreds of mines like this with an estimated 150,000 to 200,000 miners working on them every day. These miners don't use equipment and tend to use their hands. The sites that these miners work on are dangerous, polluting and very labour intensive. They can cause accidents, overexertion, exposure to toxic chemicals and gases, and at times even violence. Now, these mines are locally known as creuseurs. There is no health care codes, there is no care for their miners, and they are expected to work in all sort of conditions, whether the weather allows for it or not. Now, one of the most sickening things about this is the fact that children are used in these mines as young as 8 years old. So a lot of militias will abduct children, traffic children and recruit children from every other part of the Congo. Children who had come from hundreds of miles away have been brought through militia networks down into these copper mines to dig, and so they dig and earn their $1 or $2 a day, and that's what continues to fund these militia groups. So children are most heavily exploited of all the people down there, and they're the most vulnerable and sometimes trafficked and exploited in some cases that are very, very violent. Children are often threatened with beatings when they don't work efficiently or hard enough, and they too are exposing their health to all kind of toxic pollutants produced by these mines, which are known to cause respiratory diseases and various skin issues and cancers. Now, the industrial mines are supposed to be the more legally run by joint ventures of foreign companies as well as the DR state-run companies. They claim to be regulated, they claim that they do not use child labour, but it's been disproven time and time again. And the main person has been disproving a lot of these Pharisee lies is a journalist by the name of Siddharth Kara, who travelled to the Congo on multiple occasions to investigate the claims of child labour and slavery, and was appalled by the state of the mines in these regions. He claimed that industrial mines are just as corrupt as the artisanal ones and have mines of up to 15,000 people working on them. He surmises that there's no such thing as clean cobalt, as like a lot of these high-tech companies like to claim that their cobalt is clean, that all cobalt that we use comes from death, comes from corruption, and in his experience he has had to get government documentation to be at these sites, or he could have been killed by the militia groups running these mines.
And it's being mined in appalling, heart-wrenching, dangerous conditions. And so that's why people need to know, because by and large the world doesn't know what's happening in the Congo.
But other things he noted while he was there is that they didn't use any sort of protection, no gloves, no masks. The fact that they claimed that they have no children working there was proven to be a complete lie, that there are hundreds and hundreds of sites like this. One important thing to note as well is that all the cobalt that is collected by both the industrial mine and the artisanal mines are all collected together, because the artisanal mines sell the found cobalt to the industrial mines, meaning that there is no separation, meaning that all the cobalt is corrupt. It's coming from blood, it's coming from suffering. So the idea of clean cobalt just simply does not exist. There are plenty of dangers that occur oftentimes when digging in these large open air pits, like pit wall collapsing, where a mountain of gravel and stone avalanches down on people, crushing their legs and arms, their spines. People have to been amputated because of it. They've had to have metal bars put into their legs. And the worst of all is that it happens in the tunnel digging. So there's probably like 10,000 to 15,000 tunnels that are dug by hand by the artisanal miners. None of them have supports, ventilation shafts, rock bolts, anything to make this in any way safe. And because of this, the tunnels collapse all the time and people get buried alive. And a lot of the time these people are children, because only children can fit in these narrow gaps. And it's a demise that it's almost too, like, it's so horrific to imagine. The government does try to reduce the amount of artisanal mines, but the problem is that the militias that run the artisanal mines fight with the government constantly, and because of this, you know, the level of human suffering just rises, and the people of the Congo are being exploited to this, and it's beyond disgusting, and it's very disheartening and sad to see these things going on. So why do people work in these mines? Well, people don't really have a choice but to work in these mines, because the cost of living is so high in their country, because most of their food, their resources are imported in, which of course anything that's imported in is going to have a higher cost. The other reason is that the mines have kind of taken over everything. Hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced because their villages have been bulldozed over to make place for these large mining concessions. So yeah, people with no alternative, no other source of income, no livelihood. So add that to the kind of the menace of the cases of people being forced and pressured to dig. And parents have to make these awful decisions where they have to think, do I send my kid to school or do we eat today? Like, they're well aware of the health impact that it has, but people are so poor and so have very, very little money that they have no choice but to go to these mines. And on top of having to make their kids go to these mines because they simply cannot survive. So the environmental costs of cobalt mining activities are also substantial. Like, southern regions of the DRC are not only home to cobalt and copper, but also very high amounts of uranium. Like, in some mining regions, scientists have made note of high radioactivity levels, and in addition to the mineral mining, similar to other industries' mining efforts, often produce pollution that leaches into neighbourhood rivers and water sources. Dust from the pulverised rock is known to cause breathing problems for local communities as well. People are literally getting sick and dying as a result of these mining practices, but that's not all. One of the biggest issues is, of course, these big tech companies that are buying this cobalt. Now, they claim that their supply from the industrial mines are not from artisanal mines, despite the fact that the industrial ones, like I said, are just as hard as the artisanal ones, and also the fact that the artisanal miners sell their mineral to the industrial ones, meaning that the cobalt they receive is both from artisanal and industrial. They cannot claim that the cobalt they are getting is clean. They cannot claim that it's ethically sourced. They will come out and say that they don't support child labour, that they don't support slavery, but they will continue to fund these mines by consistently and constantly paying for these cobalt ores that they so desperately need for their batteries, that they're willing to ignore the level of suffering and pain that's going on. And these tech companies have huge marketing teams that will come out and use their PR powers to claim that they only source clean, non-child labour mines, which is clearly been disproven. They'll donate money to charities and organisations to help combat the issues of this mining, but the reality is they don't really care. They don't care how they get the cobalt. They don't care if children suffer. They don't care if people are dying. They don't care if people are getting paid very little. They don't care if they're slaves. At the end of the day, they don't care. They care about the actual mineral, and they will take it whatever way they can get it. And it's a lie that they will spread and continue to spread through their ridiculously expensive PR teams. And they will lie and they'll claim ignorance, even though it's been disproven time and time again, especially in recent years with the journalists mentioned earlier. They are clearly corrupt and they clearly don't care. And to act like they do is very disingenuous, and it's laughing at the face of people who are suffering as a result of this. So you might be thinking at this point, like, what are the DRC government doing about reducing the amount of suffering and reducing the amount of corruption? And in 2018 they did enact mining reforms that were aimed at strengthening control over these mines, and they did declare an actual tax increase on the industrial produced cobalt. In 2019 they did try to improve the rights of working conditions by establishing a state-owned Enterprise Generale du Cobalt, or otherwise known as the EGC, which is given a monopoly on buying and marketing the artisanally produced ore from designated zones. The idea was basically that they would develop the artisanal sector, boost the standards and profit from the trade. However, it's clear that these illegal mines are still happening. It's clear that the EGC has yet to buy any cobalt, so it seems to have been a way to show publicly and internationally that they're making changes, but in reality they're not. And the other issue is, as well, which is a story as old as time itself, is that some of these politicians have close ties to these artisanal mines. They have close ties to the companies that run them. They themselves are making money off these mines, so it's in their best interest to basically keep the corruption going so they can keep their pockets lined. So the government is literally doing fuck all to actually try to reduce this. They don't care about the suffering that's being had on their people. So what are some of the solutions to something like this? Well, that's a very kind of obviously complicated question to answer. There is some things that we can do. We can apply some international pressure on these mining companies that could force the government to actually better regulate the conditions and laws in place, and use the proper PPE equipment, ban artisanal mining, and ban children from these mines. Now, another way, which would probably be a much more effective way, is to reduce the demand for cobalt. So how do we do that? Well, researchers at the University of California have devised a way to make lithium-ion batteries without having to use the cobalt. So if we can reduce the need for cobalt, reduce the demand for it, then this would reduce all of these mines so that people can't be exploited. Now, the other issue as well is that there's a lot of theories going on that by 2033 at the latest we will actually experience shortages in cobalt because of the amount that's being used. And as I sit there and write this script on my Mac that has a lithium ion battery with cobalt in it, that I record with a DSLR that also has a battery with cobalt, as well as a microphone, I understand that there's a slight hypocrisy. I understand there's a slight irony in the fact that I'm using these things to tell this story, but it wasn't even something I was aware of. It's not something that a lot of people aren't aware of, and that's why I feel it's important to share the stories of these people, because people are being exploited. The people of the DRC are being exploited to a level that is so beyond disgusting, and unless the international government puts pressure on them to better regulate, this won't change. We all benefit from cobalt. We are all connected, me included. But as per usual, we are benefiting from the suffering of others. Like, we need a world that has more compassion and more care, and not depending on cobalt or lithium or other minerals that are exploited for profit, because cobalt isn't the only minerals exploited for profit. We also have the same issues with lithium and other minerals that we use in our everyday modern appliances.
The militias moved in, and Eastern Congo is sitting on some of the largest reserves in the world of those 3TG minerals, especially tantalum. And those are all used in microprocessors.
You know, all I can do is hope that spreading the message can help these people's lives. That more people know about it, the more pressure we put on the Congolese government, maybe things can change. And it's just a reminder that sometimes, you know, we live in a world that's pretty fucked up, and it's sad. And it's a shame. So that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. As per usual, I am very much appreciative of everyone that takes the time to watch, like, share, subscribe. I've been getting some decent views lately, so and some new subscribers. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. I always do these little messages at the end, as I always say, because it's important to me to be grateful to the audience and to let people know I'm very much appreciative and I don't take it for granted. I hope you enjoyed the story. I know it's a sad one, but I think it was an important one to tell, and it wasn't something I knew a lot about, so I thought it was important to share with you all. So thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. More videos to come as always. Until next time, peace out.